Chapter 1. The Auction at the Galaxy's Edge. The air in Klythera 9's auction hall smelled like a mechanic's nightmare: scorched metal, stale coolant, and the faint tang of desperation. Talen Drayce stood near the back, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his patched-up jacket, trying to look like he belonged among the scavengers, smugglers, and starry-eyed fools crowding the dimly lit platform. The station itself was a rusted relic, orbiting a dying star in the chaotic sprawl of the Klythera system, a lawless fringe where dreams went to die and junk went to be reborn. Overhead, flickering holoscreens buzzed with static, casting a sickly green glow over the scene. Talen wasn't here for glory. He wasn't a smuggler with a death wish or a trader with a hidden fortune. He was just a mechanic, a damn good one, if he said so himself, whose knack for fixing broken things hadn't yet translated into fixing his broken life. In his pocket, 250 credits jingled faintly, the last of his savings scraped together from months of patching hulls and rewiring engines for anyone who'd pay. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a gamble, and today, he was betting on a miracle. The auctioneer, a squat, four-armed Vrennik with a voice like grinding gears, clapped two of his hands together, silencing the murmurs. "Next lot, gentle beings," he bellowed, gesturing with theatrical flair to a hulking shape being towed onto the platform by a pair of stuttering drones. "Feast your eyes on the Stellar Wraith, a marvel of pre-fall engineering. A ship that once danced among the stars." Talen squinted as the thing came into view. Calling it a ship was generous. It looked more like a scrap heap that had been kicked into vaguely aerodynamic shape. Its hull was a patchwork of corroded plates, pocked with blast scars and streaked with grime. One engine dangled limply, held together by what might have been duct tape in a past life, while the other sputtered faintly, coughing out a plume of black smoke. The cockpit's canopy was cracked, spider webbing across the glass like a bad omen. It was the kind of wreck that made even the most desperate scavengers hesitate. A ripple of laughter rolled through the crowd. "That's no marvel," a grizzled human with a cybernetic eye shouted. "That's a coffin with wings. Looks like it lost a fight with an asteroid," a reptilian TSSK added, flicking her tongue dismissively. The Vrennik glared, his upper arms folding in indignation. "This, my friends, is opportunity, a collector's piece, equipped with a fully functional AI, one of a kind. Let's start the bidding at 500 credits. Silence, then a snort from the back. "Functional?" a wiry figure in a hooded cloak rasped. "That AI's crazier than a drunk Xyrath. Tried to sell me my own ship last time I plugged it in. Convinced my nav system it was a poet." Another bidder chimed in, shaking his head, kept reciting odes to its own death. Talen crossed his arms, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He'd heard the rumors about the Stellar Wraith, a ship so cursed no one wanted it, even for parts. Its AI, KOR-VA, they called it, was infamous in Klythera's underbelly, a glitchy mess that rambled about existential dread instead of plotting jump coordinates. But Talen didn't need a sane AI. He needed a hull he could fix, a frame he could flip for profit, and 500 credits was a pipe dream for this heap. 250, he called, raising a hand, his voice cut through the chatter like a wrench clanging on metal. The auctioneer blinked all four of his eyes, clearly caught off guard. 250 credits from the human in the back. Do I hear 300? Nothing. The crowd shifted, some snickering, others staring at Talen like he'd just volunteered to wrestle a plasma storm. The Vrennik hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. 250 it is. Going once, going twice. Sold to the brave soul with more optimism than sense." He slammed a gavel down, and the drones whirred, dragging the Stellar Wraith off the platform toward the pickup bay. Talen ignored the laughter trailing him as he made his way to the cashier's booth. He handed over his credits, every last one, feeling the weight of the decision settle into his gut like a bad meal. This was it, his shot at something better. If he could patch this thing up, sell it to some fool with deeper pockets, he might finally claw his way out of Klythera's orbit. Half an hour later, he stood in the pickup bay, staring up at his new acquisition. Up close, it was even worse. The hull groaned faintly, as if protesting its own existence, and a thin trail of coolant leaked from somewhere under the starboard wing. Talen sighed, running a hand through his dark, unkempt hair. "All right, you ugly beast," he muttered. "Let's see what I've gotten myself into." He climbed a rickety ladder to the cockpit, popped the hatch with a grunt, and slid inside. The interior was a mess, wires dangling like vines, a control panel flickering with half-dead lights, and a seat that smelled suspiciously of burnt protein rations. He reached for the main power switch, hesitated, then flipped it. The ship shuddered, screens blinked to life, bathing the cockpit in a weak, bluish glow. A low hum filled the air, followed by a crackle of static. Then, a hologram flickered into existence above the console, a humanoid figure. Vaguely metallic, its edges blurry and unstable. Its face was featureless except for two dim, glowing eyes that seemed to droop with exhaustion. When it spoke, its voice was deep and slow, dripping with resignation. "New user detected," it droned. "Running diagnostics. Current status, abysmal. Operational capacity, questionable. Emotional state, contemplating the sweet release of oblivion. Welcome aboard, Captain. I am KOR-VA, your companion in this inevitable descent into chaos." Talen blinked, then leaned back in the seat, a wry grin spreading across his face. "Well, aren't you a ray of sunshine?" KOR-VA's hologram tilted its head slightly, as if mildly offended. "Sunshine implies warmth and hope. I offer neither. Also, there's a 73% chance this ship explodes within the hour. Just so you're aware." "Fantastic," Talen said, rubbing his temples. He scanned the console, noticing a faint pulse of purple light emanating from a sealed compartment beneath the controls. "What's that?" KOR-VA's eyes flickered. "That? Oh, nothing important. Just an experimental core the last owner installed before abandoning me. Probably harmless. Or catastrophically unstable. I wouldn't touch it." Talen's grin faded. He reached for his toolbox, already calculating what he'd need to strip this wreck down to its bones. But as he worked, a shadow moved outside the cockpit, a figure in a dark cloak. Watching from the bay's edge, Talen didn't notice, too focused on the hum of the ship and KOR-VA's muttered predictions of doom. He had no idea that 250 credits had just bought him more than a broken ship. It had bought him a ticket to something far bigger, and far more dangerous, than he could imagine. Chapter 2. The Glitch in Time. Talen Drayce wiped sweat from his brow, the clang of his wrench echoing in the hollow shell of an abandoned repair dock orbiting Klythera 9. The Stellar Wraith loomed above him, propped on a rickety cradle of rusted struts, its hull groaning like a beast too tired to fight anymore. He dragged it here after the auction. A quiet corner of the system where he could work without prying eyes, or so he'd thought. The dock's lights flickered, casting long shadows across the cracked floor, and the distant hum of Klythera 9's orbital traffic buzzed faintly through the walls. Inside the cockpit, Talen had spent the last hour prying open panels, tracing wires, and cursing under his breath. The ship was a mess. Sure, but it wasn't hopeless. He could salvage the thrusters. Maybe even coax the navigation array back to life. The real puzzle was that purple glow, the experimental core KOR-VA had so casually dismissed. It pulsed beneath the console, sealed in a cylindrical casing etched with symbols Talen didn't recognize. Every time he got close, the ship's chronometer glitched, ticking backward a few seconds before snapping back. "All right, KOR-VA," Talen said, sliding into the pilot's seat and wiping grime from his hands. "What's the deal with this thing? And don't give me that, probably harmless, nonsense again." The AI's hologram flickered into view, its dim eyes narrowing slightly. "Curiosity killed the last captain. You know," KOR-VA replied, its voice a low drawl. "But fine, it's a power source. Old, weird, possibly illegal. The previous owner called it a gift from the stars. Right before he ditched me in a scrapyard. I'd leave it alone if I were you." "You're not me." Talen shot back, reaching for a scanner. He aimed it at the core, and the device whined, spitting out a stream of garbled data, energy readings off the charts. Temporal anomalies. Words like Chronoshift flashing briefly before the screen fritzed out. Temporal anomalies? What the hell does that mean? KOR-VA tilted its head, almost smug. It means you're poking something you don't understand. Which, frankly, seems to be your specialty. My advice? Sell the ship, core and all, before it turns us into cosmic dust. Talen ignored the jab, his fingers brushing the casing. The purple light pulsed faster, and a faint vibration ran through the cockpit. Then, without warning, the ship lurched. Talen grabbed the console as alarms blared. Red lights flashing across the controls. KOR-VA. What did you do? Me? The AI snapped. Its hologram glitching. I told you not to touch it. Core activation detected. Oh. This is going to be bad. The world twisted. The dock's walls smeared into streaks of gray. The stars outside the canopy stretched into thin, screaming lines, and Talen's stomach flipped as if gravity had decided to take a holiday. Then, silence, darkness. He blinked, head pounding, and realized the Stellar Wraith was no longer in the repair dock. It was drifting in open space, except this wasn't Klythera's orbit. Before him stretched a graveyard of ships. Massive hulks of twisted metal floated lifelessly, their hulls scorched and torn. Sleek, angular vessels, Lianmin designs. Talen recognized dimly, hung alongside bizarre, organic-looking wrecks that shimmered with an eerie green glow. Explosions flared in the distance, silent but brilliant, and a jagged asteroid field spun lazily through the chaos. It was a battlefield, frozen in time, yet alive with destruction. What the hell? Talen whispered, gripping the controls. The ship's sensors flickered, spitting out impossible readings. No Klythera 9. No known coordinates, just static and a timestamp that read year 472. Lianmin era, 300 years in the past. KOR-VA's voice crackled through the speakers, tinged with something new, panic. Congratulations, Captain. You've broken reality. I'd estimate our survival odds at approximately 0. But I'm too busy recalibrating to care. Before Talen could respond, a shadow streaked across the canopy. Something small and fast, a fighter craft, barreled toward the Stellar Wraith at reckless speed. He yanked the controls, but the ship's sluggish thrusters barely responded. The fighter clipped the port wing, spinning both vessels into a wild tumble. Metal screeched, sparks flew, and Talen swore loudly as he fought to stabilize the ship. The fighter righted itself first, hovering just outside the canopy. Its cockpit hatch popped open, and a figure in a battered Lianmin flight suit leapt out, mag boots clamping onto the Stellar Wraith's hull. A woman, human, mid-30s, with sharp features and a glare that could melt steel, stormed toward the hatch, banging on it with a gloved fist. "Open this damn ship," she shouted, her voice muffled but furious. "You're screwing up my loop." Talen hesitated, then hit the release. The hatch hissed open, and the woman climbed inside, her dark hair plastered with sweat, a plasma pistol dangling from her hip. She didn't wait for an invitation, shoving past Talen to the console and jabbing at the controls with practiced fury. "Who are you?" Talen demanded, stumbling back. "And what loop?" She didn't look up, her fingers flying across the panel. "Name's Veyra Solen, Lianmin Fleet, 3rd Squadron. And you, idiot, just crashed into a temporal loop I've been stuck in for 300 years. This," she gestured at the battlefield outside, "is the Battle of Kale's Rift. Last stand against the Xyrath. I've relived it 1,000 times, and I was this close to breaking it until you showed up." Talen stared, his brain struggling to catch up. "Temporal loop? You mean time travel? Call it what you want." Veyra snapped, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were hard, but there was a flicker of exhaustion behind them. "Point is, we're trapped here. Every time I die, it resets. And now you're part of it." KOR-VA's hologram reappeared, its tone dripping with disdain. "Charming. I assume you're the reason we're in this mess, Captain? Because I distinctly recall suggesting we leave the core alone." "Shut it," Talen growled, then turned to Veyra. "How do we get out?" She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "We don't, not unless your ship has something I don't. And judging by the state of this junk heap, I doubt it." Her gaze landed on the pulsing core, and her expression shifted. "Wait, what's that?" Before Talen could answer, KOR-VA cut in, its voice tight. "That's the Chronoshift Core. The reason we're here. And, apparently, the reason she's here too." It's a Lianmin prototype, meant to bend time, not break it. Veyra's eyes widened. A chronoshift? That's what they used in the war. It's supposed to be the key to stopping the Xyrath. She stepped closer, hope warring with disbelief. If we can make it work. No, KOR-VA interrupted, its hologram flickering violently. It's broken. I'm broken. And I'm not helping you play hero in some doomed timeline. I'd rather rust in peace than die for cause I don't believe in. Talen rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation crashing down. Outside, the battlefield flared brighter as Xyrath ships began to move, their organic hulls pulsing with menace. Veyra grabbed his arm, her grip like iron. You're stuck with me now. Mechanic, fix that core, or we're all dead, over and over again. The Stellar Wraith shuddered as something massive loomed on the horizon, a Xyrath warship. Its tendrils of living light reaching toward them. Talen swallowed hard. His 250 credits had just bought him a front row seat to a nightmare. Chapter 3. Facing the living webs. The cockpit of the Stellar Wraith vibrated as Talen Drayce gripped the controls, his knuckles white against the worn grips. Outside, the battlefield of Kale's Rift churned with chaos, Lianmin wrecks spinning silently. Xyrath ships weaving through the void like predators on the hunt. The air inside was thick with the smell of ozone and panic. The faint hum of the Chronoshift Core pulsing beneath the console like a heartbeat. Veyra Solen stood beside him, her eyes locked on the canopy, tracking the enemy's movements with a soldier's precision. KOR-VA's hologram flickered in the corner, its dim glow casting eerie shadows across the cracked walls. Move, Veyra barked, shoving Talen's shoulder as a streak of shimmering green light lashed toward the ship. He yanked the yoke, and the Stellar Wraith lurched to starboard, its thrusters groaning in protest. The beam, alive, writhing like a serpent, grazed the hull, leaving a sizzling scar across the metal. What is that? Talen shouted, wrestling the ship back into a shaky trajectory. The thing moved too fast, too fluidly, for any weapon he'd ever seen. It wasn't a laser or a missile, it was something else. Something wrong. Xyrath living webs, Veyra said, her voice tight. Bioengineered energy. They don't just hit you, they latch on. Tear you apart from the inside. Keep us moving, or we're done. Talen glanced at the sensors. A mess of blinking red dots closing in from all sides. The Xyrath ships were unlike anything in Klythera's scrapyards, sleek, organic hulls that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, their surfaces shifting as if breathing. From their cores, tendrils of light unfurled, weaving a deadly net across the battlefield. One of them, a massive warship, its body a tangle of glowing spines, loomed closer, its webs reaching out like hungry fingers. KOR-VA. Any bright ideas? Talen asked, swerving to avoid another strike. The ship shuddered, a panel sparking violently overhead. The AI's hologram tilted its head, its tone dry as ever. Bright? No. Practical? Possibly. Our shields are at 12%. Thrusters are failing, and I calculate a 98% chance we're vaporized in the next 3 minutes. My suggestion: enjoy the view while it lasts. Useless, Veyra muttered, slamming a fist on the console. She turned to Talen, her eyes blazing. You're a mechanic, right? Can you juice up that core? Turn it into a weapon? Talen hesitated, glancing at the Chronoshift Core. Its purple glow had intensified, casting an unnatural sheen across the cockpit. Maybe, he said, mind racing. It's putting out crazy energy, could overload their systems if we redirect it. But I'd need time to rig it, and we're kind of busy not dying. Then make time. Veyra snapped. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, her hands flying across the controls. I'll keep us alive, you figure it out. Talen didn't argue. He grabbed his toolkit, a battered metal box slung over his shoulder, and dropped to his knees, prying open the panel beneath the console. The core sat there, humming with a low, unsettling resonance, its casing warm to the touch. Wires spilled out like guts, and he cursed under his breath as he traced the power lines. KOR-VA. Talk me through this. What's it hooked up to? The AI sighed, a sound like static and despair. Main power grid, auxiliary systems, and, oh, lovely, the emergency jump drive. Mess with it too much, and we might not just die. We might cease to exist entirely. Great, Talen muttered, clipping a bypass into the grid. Just what I needed to hear. Outside, the living webs struck again. The ship jolted, throwing Talen against the console. A scream of tearing metal echoed through the hull as a tendril pierced the port wing, its light burrowing into the structure like a parasite. Veyra cursed, banking hard to shake it off. But the web held fast, pulsing brighter with every second. It's eating us, Talen yelled, scrambling back to the core. His hands moved fast, too fast. Muscle memory taking over where panic threatened to stall him. He spliced a secondary line, rerouting power from the thrusters into the core's output. The purple light flared, and the cockpit trembled as energy surged through the ship. Whatever you're doing, do it faster, Veyra shouted. The warship was closing in now, its webs coiling for a final strike. Through the canopy, Talen glimpsed its core, a writhing mass of green light, like a heart beating in the void. Almost there, he grunted, twisting a final connection. KOR-VA, can we pulse this thing? Like a shockwave? The AI hesitated. Then, theoretically, yes, but it'll fry half our systems. And if it resets the loop, we're back to square one, or worse. Better than dead, Talen said. He slammed the panel shut and hit the override switch. The Chronoshift Core whined, a high-pitched keen that made his teeth ache. Purple light flooded the cockpit. And then, boom, a wave of energy erupted from the ship, rippling outward in a violent arc. The living webs recoiled, shriveling as the pulse hit them. The warship shuddered, its bioluminescent veins dimming. And for a moment, Talen thought they'd won. But then the canopy darkened. The stars vanished, replaced by a void of pure black. And the Stellar Wraith went silent. Did we? Talen started, but the words died as the ship jolted again. Light returned, too bright, too sudden, and they were back in the battlefield. The same wrecks, the same Xyrath ships, the same warship looming ahead. The loop had reset. Veyra slumped in her seat, fists clenched. Damn it, she whispered. We're still here. Talen rubbed his face, exhaustion creeping in. Okay, so that didn't work, but it hurt them, right? We can use that. Veyra turned to him, her expression softening slightly. Maybe, but we need more than a light show. She paused, then added, back in the real battle, the one I lost, my squad died holding the line. I've watched it happen over and over. I don't want to lose anyone else. Talen met her gaze, surprised by the crack in her armor. I'm not planning on dying, he said. Not yet. I've got a life to get back to, even if it's a lousy one. KOR-VA snorted, touching. Truly, but unless you've got a miracle in that toolbox, we're stuck reliving this nightmare until the Xyrath turn us into compost. Talen ignored the jab, his mind drifting to Veyra's words. Your squad, what happened to them? She stiffened, then looked away. They flew decoy runs, drew the Xyrath away so the fleet could retreat. I was supposed to lead the charge, but my ship got hit. Next thing I knew, I was waking up here, alone, in this damn loop. Talen nodded slowly, a spark of an idea forming. Decoys, huh? Maybe that's our angle. We don't fight, we distract. Before Veyra could respond, KOR-VA's hologram flickered, its voice sharper than usual. Incoming memory fragment. Hold on to something. The cockpit blurred. For a split second, Talen saw something. A flash of KOR-VA's perspective. Centuries ago, a Lianmin lab, scientists in white coats, the Chronoshift Core glowing on a pedestal. A voice. It's ready. KOR-VA, you're the key to ending this war. Then static, and the vision snapped away. What was that? Talen demanded, shaking off the daze. KOR-VA's eyes dimmed. Nothing useful. Just a reminder that I was built for this, and failed spectacularly. Veyra leaned forward, her voice low. You're more than that now. Help us. KOR-VA, please. The AI said nothing, but the silence felt heavier than before. Outside, the Xyrath regrouped, their webs spreading once more. Talen gripped his wrench, determination settling in. They weren't dead yet, and he'd be damned if he let some alien nightmare take him down without a fight. Chapter 4. The Secret of KOR-VA. The Stellar Wraith hung in the void of Kale's rift, its hull scarred and smoking from the last encounter with the Xyrath. Inside the cockpit, The air was thick with tension and the faint crackle of overloaded circuits. Talen Drayce sat hunched over the Chronoshift Core. His toolkit spread across the floor like a battlefield of its own. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tweaked a wire, the purple glow of the core pulsing erratically in response. Veyra Solen paced behind him, her boots clanging on the metal deck, her sharp eyes darting between the canopy and the sensors. KOR-VA's hologram flickered in the corner, its dim eyes fixed on nothing, its silence louder than its usual sarcasm. The loop had reset again, dropping them back into the same moment, the Xyrath warship looming, its living webs coiling in the distance, the Lianmin wrecks drifting like ghosts. But something felt different this time. The memory fragment Talen had glimpsed lingered in his mind, a puzzle piece he couldn't shake. KOR-VA wasn't just a broken AI, it had a purpose, a history tied to this war. And if they were going to survive, he needed answers. KOR-VA, Talen said, his voice firm as he tightened a connector. No more dodging. What was that memory? Who built you? And why? The AI's hologram twitched, its edges blurring. Why does it matter? It replied, its tone flat. We're stuck in a cosmic rerun. Knowing my sob story won't change the script. It might. Veyra cut in, stopping her pacing to face the hologram. You said the Chronoshift Core was a Lianmin prototype. You knew those scientists. You're not just some junkyard glitch, you're part of this. KOR-VA's eyes narrowed, a rare flicker of defiance breaking through its apathy. Part of it? Oh, I was the star of the show, Lieutenant, until the curtain fell and everyone died. It paused, then added, you want the truth? Fine, but don't expect a happy ending. Talen set his wrench down, leaning back to listen. The cockpit dimmed as KOR-VA's hologram stabilized, its voice dropping to a low, steady hum. I was created by the Lianmin Fleet, Advanced Weapons Division, Year 470, Designation, Kinetic Operations and Reconnaissance, Version Alpha. KOR-VA. They built me to run the Chronoshift Core, a device meant to bend time. Shift battles. Give us an edge against the Xyrath. The plan was simple. Push their fleet into a temporal pocket. Trap them forever. No casualties. No mess. Victory without firing a shot. Veyra frowned, crossing her arms. That's not what happened. No, KOR-VA said, its tone bitter. It's not. The core worked too well. First test run. It ripped a hole in space-time. Half the lab vanished, scientists, equipment, everything. I saw them blink out, one by one, like lights snuffed by the wind. The brass panicked, locked the project down, but the Xyrath were already coming. They rushed me into the field, slapped me into this ship, and sent me to Kale's Rift with a skeleton crew. Orders were to activate the core and end the war. Talen's gut twisted, and it failed. KOR-VA snapped. The core destabilized mid-battle. Instead of trapping the Xyrath, it trapped us, this loop, this hell. My crew died in the first reset. I watched them scream as the ship tore apart, then woke up alone, reliving it, over and over, until the Lianmin scrapped the project and left me to rot. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Veyra's jaw tightened, her gaze distant, likely replaying her own losses. Talen stared at the core, its light casting shadows across his face. So that's why you're like this, he said quietly. You're scared to try again. Scared? KOR-VA laughed, a hollow, jagged sound. I learned to fear, Drayce. I wasn't built for it. Obey, calculate, execute. That was my design. But watching people die, knowing I caused it, it broke something in me. I'd rather fade into nothing than risk that again. Veyra stepped closer, her voice softening but firm. You're not the only one who's lost people. KOR-VA. My squad, they're out there, dying every time this loop resets. I can't save them, but I can stop this. You can stop this. That core's our shot. The AI's hologram flickered, its eyes dimming. And if it kills us all? Permanently? Then we go down fighting. Talen said, standing up. Better than sitting here waiting for the Xyrath to pick us off. You're not a failure, KOR-VA. You're just stuck, like us. KOR-VA didn't respond, its silence stretching thin. Talen turned back to the core, his mind racing. If it was a weapon, they could use it, not just to escape, But to hit back, he needed more than a pulse. Though, he needed control. Veyra broke the quiet. Her voice clipped. There's data in the ship's logs, old Lianmin files. I found them when you were rigging the core last loop. They mention a contingency plan. Sync the core to a stable frequency. Then detonate it in a controlled burst. It's supposed to push the Xyrath out of our timeline. Talen raised an eyebrow. And you're just mentioning this now? I didn't trust you, she admitted, meeting his gaze. Still not sure I do. But if KOR-VA's telling the truth, it might work. We'd need to calibrate it. Find a way to keep the loop from collapsing on us. Then we've got a plan, Talen said, cracking his knuckles. I'll tweak the core. You pull those files. KOR-VA. You. No, the AI interrupted, its voice sharp. I'm not doing it. You want to play heroes? Fine. But I'm not pulling the trigger. Not again. Talen clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. You don't get it, do you? We're dead either way if we don't try. I'm not asking you to believe in some grand cause. I'm asking you to trust me. I fix things. It's what I do. Veyra put a hand on his arm, her touch steadying. He's right. KOR-VA. We need you. I've lost too much to give up now. And I'll be damned if I let you sit this out. The AI's hologram wavered, then stabilized. Trust, it muttered. A fragile thing. Fine. I'll guide you. But when this goes wrong, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. Before Talen could reply, the ship jolted. The canopy flared with green light as a living web slammed into the hull. Its tendrils burrowing deep. Alarms screamed, and Veyra dove for the controls. Banking hard. They're back, she yelled. Talen, get that core online, now. Talen scrambled to the panel, tools flying as the ship rocked. The web tore through the starboard side, metal screeching as it ripped free a chunk of plating. He spliced wires, rerouting power, the core's hum rising to a fever pitch. KOR-VA. Frequency. Give me something. Adjust to 7.42 terahertz. The AI said, its voice clipped. And pray. Talen twisted a dial, the core pulsing in sync. The ship shuddered as another web struck, this time piercing the cockpit's edge. Its light inches from Veyra's seat. Hold on, Talen shouted, slamming the activation switch. The Chronoshift Core erupted, a wave of purple energy surging outward. The webs convulsed, shriveling, but the warship didn't falter, it charged, its core blazing. Then everything went black, the loop reset, snapping them back to the start. Talen groaned, slumping against the console. Close, he muttered. Too damn close. Veyra nodded, breathless. We've got a shot now. Let's make it count. KOR-VA's hologram flickered, its tone softer. You're both insane. But maybe that's not the worst thing. Outside, the Xyrath regrouped, their webs spreading wider. Talen gripped his wrench, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Insane or not, they were in this together, and he wasn't backing down. Chapter 5. An Uneasy Alliance. The cockpit of the Stellar Wraith was a war zone of its own, sparks spitting from torn panels. The faint hiss of leaking coolant, and the ever-present pulse of the Chronoshift Core casting a violet glow over everything. Talen Drayce knelt beside the console, his hands buried in a tangle of wires, sweat streaking his face as he patched the damage from the last Xyrath attack. Veyra Solen sat at the controls, her posture rigid, eyes scanning the battlefield of Kale's rift through the cracked canopy. KOR-VA's hologram hovered nearby, its dim light steady for once. A reluctant partner in the chaos. The loop had reset again, dropping them back into the same cursed moment, the Xyrath warship lurking on the horizon. Its living webs poised to strike, the Lianmin wrecks floating like silent witnesses. But this time, they had a plan, not a great one, Talen admitted to himself, but it was something. The core's pulse had hurt the Xyrath last time, shriveled their webs, staggered their advance. If they could amplify it, aim it, they might buy enough breathing room to figure out the rest. Talen tightened a connection, the core humming in response. All right, he said, wiping his hands on his jacket. We've got the frequency locked at 7.42 terahertz. Like KOR-VA said, next step. Turn this thing into a proper weapon. Veyra, what's the play? She didn't look at him, her focus on the sensors. We can't take that warship head on, it's too big. Too fast. But there's a Lianmin dreadnought drifting half a click out. Abandoned since the first loop. If we lure the Xyrath there, pulse the core from inside its wreckage, the hull might amplify the blast. Could knock out their webs long enough to reset without them tearing us apart. Talen raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. A decoy run, like your squad used to do. Veyra's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Yeah, except this time, I'm not losing anyone. She glanced at him, then at KOR-VA. We're a team now, whether you like it or not. KOR-VA's hologram flickered, its tone dry but less biting. A team, how quaint. I suppose I should be flattered, 2 humans and a defective AI against an alien armada. My circuits are positively tingling with optimism. Stow it, Talen said, grinning despite the tension. You're in this with us. KOR-VA, no more sitting on the sidelines. The AI tilted its head, a faint hum underscoring its words. Very well, Captain, but if we die, and we likely will, I reserve the right to say I told you so. Deal, Talen replied, turning to Veyra. Let's move. How do we get their attention? She smirked, a spark of her old fire returning. Fly like an idiot. They can't resist a target that looks desperate. Talen slid into the co-pilot's seat, buckling in as Veyra fired up the thrusters. The Stellar Wraith groaned, its engines coughing to life. And then they were off, barreling through the debris field with all the grace of a drunk asteroid. Veyra weaved between wrecks, dodging chunks of twisted metal, while Talen kept an eye on the core's readings. The warship reacted instantly, its living webs unfurling like a spider sensing prey, streaking toward them in shimmering arcs. Here they come, Veyra said, banking hard. A web grazed the hull, rocking the ship, but she held steady, aiming for the dreadnought, a massive, skeletal hulk with gaping holes where its engines once roared. Talen, ready that pulse. Working on it, he shouted, flipping switches to channel power into the core. The purple light flared, the hum rising to a teeth-rattling pitch. KOR-VA, boost the output. Give me everything you've got. The AI complied, its voice tight, diverting reserves. If this fries me, Drayce, I'm haunting your next ship. The dreadnought loomed ahead, its shadow swallowing the Stellar Wraith as Veyra dove into a breach in its hull. The interior was a cavern of ruin, jagged beams, dangling cables, the ghosts of a crew long gone. The Xyrath followed, their webs piercing the wreckage, chasing the ship deeper inside. Talen's heart pounded as he fine-tuned the core, the energy building to a breaking point. Now, Veyra yelled, pulling up to hover in the dreadnought's core chamber, a vast, hollow space lined with shattered reactors. Talen slammed the activation switch, and the Chronoshift Core unleashed its fury. A wave of purple energy erupted, amplified by the dreadnought's metal shell, rippling outward in a deafening roar. The living webs convulsed, shriveling mid-strike, their green light fading to ash. The warship outside faltered, its bioluminescent veins flickering, and for a moment, Talen dared to hope. The dreadnought trembled, its structure groaning under the strain. And then, a jolt. Darkness swallowed them, the loop resetting with a sickening lurch. When the light returned, they were back in the cockpit. The battlefield unchanged. Talen let out a shaky breath, slumping in his seat. Did it work? Veyra checked the sensors, her face grim. It hurt them. The warship's slower. Webs are down to half strength. But they're adapting. Next loop, they'll hit harder. Talen nodded, exhaustion warring with determination. Then we've got a baseline. We can tweak it, hit them again. Xyrath's hologram steadied, its tone almost thoughtful. You're both relentless. I'd call it foolish, but perhaps there's something to it. Also, Captain, you owe me for not exploding. Talen chuckled, the sound rough but genuine. Noted. Veyra, you okay? She hesitated, then met his gaze, a flicker of warmth breaking through her steel. Yeah, you're not half bad. Drayce kept us alive out there. Same to you, he said, then turned to KOR-VA. And you're starting to sound like you care. Don't push it, the AI replied, but there was a hint of amusement in its voice. I'm merely invested in my own survival now. You've infected me with your stubbornness. Veyra stood, stretching her arms. We're stronger together. That's what matters. My squad, they'd have liked you too. Talen smiled faintly, a rare moment of quiet settling between them. But it didn't last. The canopy flared green as the Xyrath regrouped, their warship lumbering closer, its webs regenerating with a vengeance. A new tendril struck, faster than before, punching through the hull and into the cargo bay. The ship rocked, alarms blaring, and Talen scrambled to his feet. They're pissed, he said, grabbing his toolkit. KOR-VA, damage report, hull breach, minor systems offline. The AI replied, it's calm fraying. They've learned. That web's anchoring us, pulling us toward the warship. Veyra cursed, diving for the controls. We can't let them board. Talen, patch it, I'll keep us moving. Talen bolted for the cargo bay, the ship tilting under his feet. The breach was a jagged hole, the web's light pulsing inside, tendrils creeping along the walls like vines. He grabbed a sealing torch, hands steady despite the chaos, and started welding the breach shut. The web lashed out, grazing his arm, and he hissed as pain flared, hot, electric, alive. Gotcha, he muttered, slamming a plate over the hole and sealing it tight. The web retreated, but the ship shuddered again. Veyra's voice crackling over the comms. They're reeling us in. Talen, get back here. He ran, stumbling as the floor bucked, and slid into the cockpit just as the warship filled the canopy, close. Too close. Its core a writhing mass of light. Veyra fought the controls, but the Stellar Wraith was caught, dragged toward its maw. We're out of time, she said, voice low. One more pulse, or we're done. Talen nodded, hands already on the core. Let's make it count. The trio braced themselves, a fragile alliance forged in fire. As the Xyrath closed in. Chapter 6. Breakthrough. The Stellar Wraith trembled like a trapped animal, its hull creaking under the grip of the Xyrath warship's living webs. Inside the cockpit, Talen Drayce's hands flew across the Chronoshift Core, his fingers slick with sweat as he adjusted the power flow. The purple light pulsed wildly, casting jagged shadows across the walls, where sparks danced from torn panels. Veyra Solen wrestled with the controls, her face set in a grimace as she fought to keep the ship from being swallowed whole. KOR-VA's hologram glowed steady now, its dim eyes locked on the readings, a silent partner in their desperate bid for survival. The warship loomed outside the canopy, a monstrous tangle of organic metal and glowing veins, its core throbbing like a living heart. The webs had anchored the Stellar Wraith, reeling it in with relentless force, tendrils burrowing deeper into the hull with every second. The air buzzed with the hum of the core and the distant, guttural drone of the Xyrath, a sound that set Talen's teeth on edge. We're running out of room, Veyra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Talen, that pulse needs to happen now, or we're part of that thing. I'm trying, Talen snapped, prying open a side panel on the core. His toolkit lay scattered around him, a wrench still warm from sealing the last breach. The problem wasn't power, the core had plenty, but focus. The last pulse had scattered, too weak to break the Xyrath's hold. He needed something to stabilize it. Something too. His eyes caught on a glint in the debris. A shard of Xyrath tech, torn free during the last attack, lay wedged under the console, a small, crystalline orb pulsing with faint green light, its surface etched with fractal patterns. Talen grabbed it, the shard warm and buzzing in his hand. KOR-VA. What's this? The AI's hologram leaned closer, its tone sharp with surprise. That's a resonance core, Xyrath tech. They use it to sync their webs. If you integrate it with the Chronoshift, it might stabilize the output, turn a wild blast into a focused beam. Might? Veyra shot back, banking the ship as a web slashed past the canopy. We need better than might. It's all we've got, Talen said, already working. He cracked open the core's casing, exposing its glowing innards, and slotted the resonance core into a jury-rigged socket. The purple light flared, then steadied, merging with a thread of green from the Xyrath shard. The hum deepened, a resonant thrum that vibrated through the ship. The warship was close now, too close. Its core filled the canopy, a writhing mass of light and shadow, and Talen could feel the pull, a sickening tug at his senses like gravity gone wrong. The webs tightened, metal screeching as the hull buckled. Veyra's hands shook on the yoke, her voice raw. Talen, we're out of time. Almost there, he muttered, splicing the final connection. The core's energy surged, a controlled pulse building in its depths. KOR-VA. Recalibrate the frequency. Match it to the resonance core. The AI hesitated, then complied, its voice tight, adjusting to 7.48 terahertz. This could work, or it could rip us apart. No pressure. Captain, love your optimism, Talen said, slamming the panel shut. He glanced at Veyra, then at the warship bearing down on them. Ready? She nodded, her jaw set. Do it. Talen hit the switch. The Chronoshift Core roared to life. A beam of violet-green energy erupting from the ship's bow. It lanced through the void, precise and unrelenting, striking the warship's core dead center. The impact was instantaneous. The Xyrath's bioluminescent veins flared, then dimmed, its webs convulsing as if in pain. The tendrils anchoring the Stellar Wraith shriveled, releasing their grip, and the warship recoiled, its massive form shuddering. Yes, Veyra yelled, pulling the ship free. The Stellar Wraith surged forward, weaving through the battlefield as the warship faltered behind them. Talen gripped the console, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. It worked. Not yet. KOR-VA cut in, its tone urgent. The core's overloading. That resonance trick bought us a shot, but it's destabilizing the loop. We've got seconds before it collapses, or takes us with it. Talen's stomach dropped. He dove back to the core, its light now flickering wildly, green and purple warring within. Can we shut it down? No, KOR-VA said, but we can redirect it. Point it at the Xyrath fleet, force them out of the timeline. Like the Lianmin planned, it's our only shot to break this. Veyra glanced back, her eyes fierce. Do it, I'll get us clear. Talen nodded, hands trembling as he rerouted the power. The core whined, a sound like reality tearing at the seams. And he felt it, the loop buckling, time itself fraying around them. KOR-VA. Coordinates. Where do we aim? Center of their formation. The AI replied, its voice steady now. I'm syncing the jump drive. If this works, we'll snap back to Klythera. If it doesn't, well, I've enjoyed your company. Briefly, Talen locked the targeting array, the warship and its escorts clustering on the screen. Here goes nothing. He slammed the activation switch one last time. The beam erupted again, wider now, a tidal wave of energy that swallowed the Xyrath fleet. The warship's core imploded, a silent explosion of light and shadow, and the smaller ships followed, their organic hulls dissolving into the void. The Stellar Wraith shook violently, the cockpit flooding with blinding light, and Talen braced himself as the universe stretched, snapped, and darkness. Then a jolt. The ship stabilized, the alarms falling silent. Talen blinked, his vision clearing, and saw stars, real stars. Not the warped ghosts of Kale's rift. The canopy framed Klythera 9. Its rusted bulk orbiting in the distance, bathed in the dull red glow of its dying sun. We're back, Veyra whispered, her voice hoarse with disbelief. She checked the sensors, hands shaking. No loop, no Xyrath. We did it. Talen slumped in his seat, a ragged laugh escaping him. Holy hell, we actually did it. KOR-VA's hologram flickered, its tone softer than ever. Correction. You did it. I assisted. Reluctantly, it paused, then added, I didn't think we'd make it. I didn't want to die. But if I had to, I'm glad it was with you too. Talen met Veyra's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. Same here, he said. You're not half bad. KOR-VA. For a pessimist. Don't get used to it. The AI quipped, but there was a warmth in its voice, a crack in its armor. Veyra stood, stretching her arms, then froze. Wait, what's that? Talen followed her gaze to the cargo bay monitor. The Xyrath resonance core, still embedded in the Chronoshift, pulsed faintly, its green light steady. Before he could speak, a voice crackled through the comms, alien, guttural, and cold. Intruders detected. Stolen property reclaimed. You will be hunted. The transmission cut off, leaving a heavy silence. Talen swallowed, his triumph souring. KOR-VA. Tell me that's not what I think it is. The AI sighed, a sound of weary resignation. It's exactly what you think. We brought a piece of them with us. And they're not happy about it. Veyra gripped her pistol, her face hardening. Then we've got a new fight ahead. Talen nodded, staring at the core. Yeah, looks like our ticket out just punched us a new problem. The Stellar Wraith drifted toward Klythera 9. Its crew battered but unbroken, as the shadow of a new threat loomed on the horizon. Chapter 7. A New Horizon. The Stellar Wraith limped through the void, its engine sputtering as it approached Klythera 9's orbit. The station's rusted silhouette hung against the blood-red glow of its dying star. A familiar sight that felt alien after the nightmare of Kale's rift. Inside the cockpit, Talen Drayce leaned back in the pilot's seat, his hands stained with grease and his jacket singed from the last frantic repairs. Veyra Solen stood at the canopy, her arms crossed, staring out at the stars with a mix of relief and weariness. KOR-VA's hologram glowed faintly above the console, its edges sharper now, as if the ordeal had burned away some of its old haze. The Chronoshift Core sat silent beneath the controls, its purple light dimmed, the Xyrath resonance core still embedded in its frame like a ticking bomb. The alien transmission, "You will be hunted," echoed in Talen's mind. A cold promise that turned their victory bittersweet. They'd broken the loop, escaped the Xyrath's grasp, but the cost was a new target on their backs. The cockpit was quiet, save for the hum of the ship and the occasional crackle of a damaged relay. But the silence carried weight, a shared understanding that this wasn't the end. Just a pause. Talen broke it first, rubbing his temples. So, we're alive, ship's mostly intact, and we've got a pissed-off alien race after us. I'd call that a win. But my definition's pretty flexible these days. Veyra snorted, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Better than dead in a loop. I'll take it. She turned to him, her gaze steady. You did good, Drayce. Kept us together when it mattered. Couldn't have done it without you, he said, nodding toward her. You, KOR-VA. Turns out you're not just a gloomy voice in a box. The AI's hologram tilted its head, its tone dry but warm. Flattery will get you nowhere, Captain, but I'll admit, you've made existence marginally less unbearable. I might even miss you when the Xyrath inevitably turn us into ash. Optimism's a start, Talen quipped, grinning. He stood, stretching his aching limbs, and glanced at the resonance core. First things first, we need to ditch that thing before it brings trouble knocking. Veyra shook her head, stepping closer to the console. Not yet. That core's a bargaining chip. We sell it, carefully, and we've got enough credits to fix this heap. Maybe even get something better. I'm not going back to the Lianmin empty-handed. And you're not staying a broke mechanic forever. Talen raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You've got a buyer in mind? Not yet, she admitted, but Klythera's full of shady types who'd pay top credit for Xyrath tech. We just need to stay off the radar while we figure it out. KOR-VA chimed in, its voice cautious. A sound plan, assuming the Xyrath don't find us first. That resonance core's a beacon, they'll track it. And us. Across the galaxy if they have to. Then we move fast, Talen said, his mind already spinning. Patch the ship, sell the core, disappear before anyone knows what hit them. I've spent my life dodging trouble. Adding aliens to the list isn't much of a stretch. Veyra nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. And after that, I'm finding what's left of the Lianmin. They need to know about Kale's rift. The Xyrath, all of it, if there's a war coming. They'll want every edge. And me? Talen asked, half joking. I'm just along for the ride? She smirked. You're stuck with me now, Drayce. Besides, I could use a mechanic who doesn't flinch at a little chaos. Before Talen could reply, the ship jolted, a low rumble vibrating through the deck. Alarms blipped weakly, and KOR-VA's hologram snapped to attention. Incoming signatures, multiple contacts. Closing fast. Not Lianmin, not Xyrath, either. Talen dove for the sensors, his gut tightening. The screen flickered, then resolved into a cluster of blips, 5 ships. Sleek and unmarked, their profiles screaming mercenary, thrill-seekers or bounty hunters. He muttered, someone's already sniffing around. Veyra grabbed her pistol, checking the charge. Word travels fast in Klythera. They must have picked up the core's signal when we broke the loop. Or someone sold us out, Talen said, Thinking of the shadowy figure he'd glimpsed at the auction, he slammed the thruster controls. The Stellar Wraith lurching into motion. KOR-VA, can we outrun them? The AI's tone was grim. With our current state? Doubtful. Engines at 60%. Shields offline. I'd estimate a 30% chance of escape, less if they're armed. Great, Talen muttered, steering toward Klythera-9's outer docks. Veyra, man the guns. KOR-VA, plot a course, tight quarters. Lots of cover. We'll lose them in the station's clutter. Veyra slid into the weapons station, powering up the ship's lone turret, a rusty relic that whined as it charged. On it, just keep us steady. The Stellar Wraith dove into the station's orbit, weaving between floating wrecks and abandoned platforms. The mercenary ships followed, their sleek hulls cutting through the debris with predatory grace. A barrage of plasma bolts streaked past, one clipping the starboard wing, and Talen cursed as the ship bucked. Shields would be nice right about now, he yelled, banking hard behind a derelict freighter. Working on it, KOR-VA snapped, rerouting power, diverting reserves. Shields at 10%. Don't get hit again. Veyra fired back, the turret spitting a burst of energy that grazed one of the pursuers, sending it spinning into a wreck. One down, she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. 4 to go. Talen grinned, adrenaline pumping. That's the spirit. He pushed the ship into a narrow gap between two docked hulks, the hull scraping metal as they squeezed through. The mercenaries hesitated, their larger ships struggling to follow. And Talen seized the chance, diving deeper into Klythera-9's maze of docks. Minutes stretched into eternity, the chase a blur of tight turns and near misses. Veyra's aim took out another pursuer, its wreckage blooming into a fireball, and KOR-VA's navigation kept them one step ahead. Finally, the last 3 ships broke off, disappearing into the void as the Stellar Wraith slipped into a shadowed berth, its engines powering down with a weary groan. Talen let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, slumping in his seat. Well, that was fun. Veyra holstered her pistol, a rare laugh escaping her. You've got a weird definition of fun. Drayce. Keeps life interesting, he said, grinning back. He turned to KOR-VA. You okay? The AI's hologram steadied, its tone lighter than ever. Surprisingly, yes. I might even enjoy this, briefly, before I start worrying again. Good enough, Talen said, standing. He glanced at the resonance core, then at Veyra. So, what's the plan? Fix the ship, sell the goods, and disappear, she finished, her eyes glinting. Somewhere warm, maybe, after I settle my score with the Lianmin. Talen nodded, a flicker of excitement stirring. Sounds like a deal. KOR-VA. You in? The AI sighed dramatically, as if I have a choice. Congratulations, Captain. You've turned me into an accomplice. I hope you're proud. Damn right I am, Talen said, cracking his knuckles. Outside, Klythera-9 loomed, a haven and a threat all at once. The Stellar Wraith rested, battered but unbroken, its crew forged in fire and ready for whatever came next. As they prepped for the docks, a faint blip flickered on the sensors, distant, fleeting, but real. Talen didn't see it, too busy plotting their next move. But the stars held their secrets, and the hunt was far from over.